The cold was going to kill her. Not the rejection, not the banishment, not even the cruelty that had marked every one of her 23 years. The cold would finish what the Silver Mist Pack had started that morning when they cast her out like garbage. Lyra's fingers had stopped hurting an hour ago. That was bad. She knew enough
Come
about
forth, my
hypothermia
pack!
from old Thea's
Heel
teaching
and circle!
to
me!
understand that when the pain stopped, death was close. Her platinum blonde hair so pale it looked white even in the dim gray light of the storm, whipped around her face in frozen strands that cut like glass. Her skin, naturally pale enough that children used to cry when they saw her, had turned a deep, frightening blue. She couldn't feel her legs anymore. The blizzard howled around her like something alive, something hungry, something determined to devour her whole. Snow drove horizontally through the mountain pass, each flake a tiny blade that found exposed skin and cut deep. The thin cloak they'd given her, the only kindness in her banishment, did nothing against wind this brutal. 6 hours. She'd been walking for 6 hours since Alpha Darius had pointed toward the mountains and told her to be gone before sunset or face execution for trespassing on pack lands. 6 hours since Torin had destroyed her in front of 300 witnesses. Lyra stumbled, her boot catching on a rock she couldn't see through the driving snow. She went down hard, hands plunging into a snowdrift up to her elbows. The cold burned. She tried to push herself up, but her arms had no strength left. This was it then. This was where she'd die. Lone in the mountains, exactly as everyone had always predicted. The cursed girl, the ghost child, too pale, too strange, too different to ever belong anywhere. She closed her eyes against the wind and waited for the cold to take her. But then she felt it. A pull, an instinct, a sensation so strong it was almost physical, tugging at something deep in her chest, urging her to move. Not forward along the path she'd been following. To the left, away from anything that looked like safety, toward what appeared to be a sheer cliff face. Lyra had learned over 23 years to trust her instincts. They were the only thing that had kept her alive in a pack that didn't want her. The inner voice that whispered when Torin was coming so she could make herself scarce. The feeling that guided her to the safest routes through hostile territory. The knowing that helped her find medicinal herbs even when the snow covered everything. She'd thought it was just survival, just the desperate adaptation of someone unwanted learning to read danger. She didn't know it was something more. With the last dregs of strength in her frozen body, Lyra pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet. The world tilted dangerously, but she forced herself to move in the direction of that inexplicable pull. One step, another. Her vision blurred. The cliff face loomed closer, promising death if she tried to climb it in this storm. But the pull insisted. Trust me, it seemed to say, just a little further. And then when she was close enough to touch the rock, when the wind should have dashed her against the stone, she saw it. A gap, an opening, hidden behind an outcropping that made it completely invisible from any other angle. There was a cave. Relief hit her so hard she almost collapsed again. Shelter. She'd found shelter. Maybe the moon goddess hadn't completely abandoned her after all. Lyra stumbled toward the entrance, already imagining the respite from the wind when she heard it. Whimpering, low and pained, coming from inside the cave. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to run. Injured animals were dangerous, unpredictable. Whatever was in that cave could kill her. Probably would kill her. She should find another shelter, another cave, anything but this one. But the whimpering came again. Weaker this time. Desperate. And Lyra's healer heart, carefully nurtured by old Thea over long years in the orphan house, overrode her caution. Someone was hurt. Someone needed help. And she'd spent her whole life invisible, unwanted, useless. If her last act on this earth could be helping someone, anyone, maybe her existence would have mattered for something. She stepped into the cave. The wind cut off immediately, leaving a ringing silence that made her ears ache. Lyra blinked, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. What she saw made her breath catch. Wolves, 12 of them. All enormous, all with pure white fur that seemed to glow even in the dim light. They were arranged in a rough circle, and they were clearly in distress. But these weren't ordinary wolves. Lyra recognized the signs immediately. The siege, the coordination, the way they'd positioned themselves, even while injured, spoke of military training of warriors who maintained formation even in crisis. Elite guards. These were elite wolves from one of the great packs. Some were shivering violently despite their thick winter coats. Some had visible injuries, blood matting their pristine fur. All of them looked like they were freezing to death despite being built for northern climates. Lyra should have backed away. Elite guards served powerful alphas. Those alphas didn't look kindly on strangers interfering with their property. She'd heard stories of Omegas executed for lesser offenses than touching an Alpha's prize warriors. But as she stood there watching them suffer, watching their labored breathing, seeing the blood on the cave floor, she found she couldn't walk away. "I'm going to help you," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the wind still howling outside. "If you'll let me." 12 white wolves turned to look at her simultaneously. It was a coordinated movement that confirmed their elite status beyond any doubt. Their eyes were various shades of blue and silver, pale and striking, and they watched her with an intensity that made her want to back toward the entrance. But she held her ground, met their gazes steadily, waited. The largest wolf, a massive beast with ice blue eyes and a presence that screamed alpha, made a soft chuffing sound, not aggressive, almost welcoming, permission granted. The others relaxed slightly, their defensive postures easing just enough that Lyra felt safe to move closer. She spent the next 30 minutes carefully assessing their conditions, working by the gray light filtering through the cave entrance. 3 had serious injuries from what looked like a rock slide, deep gashes in their sides bruising that darkened their white fur to purple and black. 2 were showing signs of severe hypothermia. Their breathing was too shallow, their heartbeats too slow, when she pressed her ear to their chests. 7 others appeared exhausted but relatively uninjured, though clearly pushed far beyond their limits. None of them could shift back to human form. That meant whatever had happened to them had either drained their energy completely or injured them badly enough that transformation was impossible. "Okay," Lyra said aloud, thinking through the problem the way she always did when working alone. Old Thea had taught her to talk through medical situations. It helped organize thoughts, catch mistakes before they became fatal. "First priority is warmth. I need a fire, but I don't have any way to start one, and there's nothing burnable in here that I can... Second priority is shelter from the wind. This cave goes deeper. I can feel a draft pulling from further in. Third priority is treating injuries properly, but that has to wait until we're all warm enough, that hands work, and I can actually see what I'm doing." She looked at the wolves who were still watching her with that unnerving, coordinated intensity. "I'm going to go deeper into the cave and see if there's anything we can use. Firewood, supplies, anything. You should stay here and to try to conserve heat. Huddle together if you can." Lyra ventured into the darkness using that same instinct that had led her to the cave in the first place. The pull was still there, gentler now, but steady, promising safety if she just trusted it. The cave narrowed, then opened into a smaller chamber about 50 feet in, and there in a corner that showed signs of careful organization, she found salvation. A stack of firewood, old but dry and ready to use. Flint and steel wrapped in oilcloth to keep them from rusting. Some ancient supplies left behind by previous travelers or hunters. A few tattered blankets. A clay pot for melting snow. Someone had used this cave before and left provisions for the next soul in need. Relief made her want to cry. Instead, she gathered everything she could carry and brought it back to the wolves. They had started to huddle together in her absence, their training clearly including cold weather survival tactics. But they watched her with those pale, intelligent eyes as she set down the supplies with a smile she couldn't quite suppress. "Look what I found," she said. "We're going to make it through this, all of us." Starting the fire took 20 minutes and nearly destroyed her. Her hands were so cold she could barely feel them, let alone control them enough for the delicate work of striking flint against steel. The flint kept slipping from her numb fingers. She had to stop twice to breathe warmth into her hands, rubbing them together with a desperation that bordered on panic. But finally, after what felt like 1,000 attempts and a significant amount of quiet cursing that would have shocked old Thea, a small flame caught in the tinder. Lyra fed it carefully, nursing it with the skill her caretakers had taught her, building it up until real heat radiated into the cave. The wolves crept closer, immediately drawn to the warmth like moths to light. "Come on," Lyra urged gently, positioning them in a tighter circle around the fire. "We need to share body heat. It's the only way we'll all survive this. I know you're trained warriors, and you probably hate showing weakness, but right now, survival matters more than pride." She worked methodically, muscle memory taking over from conscious thought. She positioned the most hypothermic wolves closest to the flames, checking their breathing and heart rates as best she could with numb fingers. The injured ones she placed where she could easily reach them. Then she treated the injuries themselves. There was no proper bandage material, so she tore strips from her already thin cloak. The cold bit harder without even that minimal protection, but the wolves needed it more. She cleaned wounds with melted snow from the clay pot, working with the steady determination of someone who'd spent years learning to heal, despite having nothing. Old Thea's voice echoed in her memory, guiding her hands even now. When she came in to check the largest wolf, the one with the commanding presence and ice-blue eyes, she found deep gashes along his ribs that he'd been hiding. You should have said something, Lyra scolded gently as she cleaned the wounds with careful precision. Leaders don't do anyone any good if they bleed out from stubbornness. The wolf made a sound that might have been sheepish if wolves could feel sheepish. Lyra could have sworn she saw amusement flicker in those intelligent eyes. By the time she finished treating everyone, full night had fallen. The blizzard outside raged harder than ever, wind screaming past the cave entrance like something alive and angry. Lyra fed more wood to the fire, rationing their supply carefully. It would have to last all night at minimum, maybe longer if the storm didn't break by morning. She settled down among the wolves who had rearranged themselves without any apparent communication into something that looked like a living nest with her at the center. Their body heat combined with the fire was finally starting to drive away the deadly cold. Lyra felt herself begin to thaw, and with the thawing came exhaustion so bone-deep it threatened to pull her under immediately. But she couldn't sleep. Someone needed to keep the fire going. Someone needed to watch for signs that any of the wolves were getting worse. Someone needed to monitor breathing and check for fever or infection. So Lyra stayed awake, feeding the fire every 20 minutes with methodical precision, checking on each wolf periodically with gentle hands. And she sang softly to pass the time and keep herself alert. She sang the lullabies old Thea used to sing when nightmares made the orphans cry. Simple melodies with words about safety and warmth and belonging. She sang work songs she'd learned in the pack's kitchens where she'd labored for her keep. She sang traveling songs and healing songs and anything else she could remember from her limited experience. Her voice was soft and sweet, trained by years of singing to herself for comfort when no one else would offer it. The wolves seemed to find it soothing. Several of them rested their massive heads on her lap or against her sides, and she stroked their fur absently as she sang, marveling at how soft it was despite the blood and dirt. The north wind blows cold, and the snow falls deep. She sang, her voice barely more than a whisper, but carrying in the quiet cave. But the fire burns bright, and the pack wolves sleep. In the darkness, we're safe. In the storm, we're warm. Together we'll weather this frozen storm. The largest wolf, the one with ice-blue eyes, who she was becoming more certain was the alpha of this group, watched her throughout the night. He never slept, she realized with growing concern. He was keeping vigil just like she was, protecting his pack even when he could barely move, even when his own injuries needed rest to heal. The mark of a true leader. Around what she guessed was 3 in the morning, when exhaustion made her barriers crumble and loneliness felt like a physical weight on her chest, Lyra found herself talking to the wolves, filling the silence with stories about her life, because the alternative was sitting with her own thoughts, and those thoughts were too painful right now. She told them about growing up in the orphan house with 29 other unwanted pups, about learning to make herself small and quiet and invisible so she wouldn't be noticed, wouldn't be a target, about watching other orphans get chosen by families while she remained year after year too pale, too strange, too much of a reminder that not all children were blessings. She told them about old Thea, the elderly Omega, who'd run the orphan house with firm hands and a kind heart, who'd taught Lyra healing and herb lore because even unwanted children needed skills that might make them useful someday, who'd been the closest thing to a mother Lyra had ever known, but who couldn't show favoritism, couldn't love just one child when she was responsible for 30. She told them about presenting as an Omega at 16 and the brief, painful hope that had sparked. Omegas were valuable, even strange-looking ones. They could bear strong pups, could soothe pack tensions, could be useful in ways that transcended appearance. Maybe she'd thought someone would finally want her. But the years had passed and no one had claimed her. By 23, she'd been the oldest unclaimed Omega in the pack. An embarrassment, a problem no one knew how to solve, until Torin had solved it for them. The wedding was this morning, Lyra said quietly, staring into the fire as the memory played behind her eyes. I'd spent 3 days sewing my dress because the pack wouldn't waste resources on a proper one for me. Borrowed fabric from the textile stores. It wasn't beautiful, but I'd done my best. She paused, throat tight, with the memory of standing in that clearing in her shabby dress, trying so hard to be hopeful. Torin was a mid-ranking beta. Nothing special, but solid, reliable. The alpha assigned him to mate with me because no one else would volunteer. I knew going in that it wasn't a love match. I didn't expect love. I just wanted belonging. A place, a person who wouldn't look at me and see something wrong. The largest wolf made a low sound in his throat. Not quite a growl, but definitely disagreement with something she'd said. He took one look at me walking down the aisle, Lyra continued, at my pale hair and pale skin and pale eyes, and he stopped the ceremony right there in front of everyone. 300 wolves watching as he said the words that everyone had been thinking for 23 years. Her voice dropped even quieter, but the words came anyway. She needed to say them to lance the wound before infection set in. "I won't mate with a ghost," she quoted Torrin's voice echoing in her memory with crystal clarity. "She's unnatural. Cursed. I want a real Omega, not whatever this thing is. Look at her, she's barely even a wolf. I refuse." Thorns filled the cave except for the crackling of the fire and the howling wind outside. Lyra kept stroking the fur of the wolf beside her, finding comfort in the simple act of touch, of being close to another living being who wasn't flinching away. "The pack agreed with him," she said, enthusiastically, like they'd been waiting for someone to finally say what everyone was thinking. "Alpha Darius banished me immediately, said I was bringing shame to the pack by forcing Torrin into an unwanted match. Gave me less than an hour to leave or face execution for trespassing." She looked down at the shredded remains of her cloak, now mostly bandages, wrapped around wolf injuries. "They gave me this cloak and the clothes on my back. Told me to be gone before sunset. It was noon. So I walked into the mountains because where else was there to go? And the blizzard hit about 3 hours later, and I thought that was fitting, somehow. Everything in my life has happened without warning. Why should death be any different?" Several of the wolves stirred, their ears twitching toward her. The largest one lifted his head from where it had been resting near her knee and fixed her with those intense, ice-blue eyes. "I don't know why I found you," Lyra admitted, meeting that gaze steadily. "But I'm glad I did. At least this way I won't die alone and useless. At least this way my last act was helping someone. Even if that someone is a pack of elite guard wolves who'll probably forget about me the moment this storm ends and you can shift back and call for your people." The wolf made that disagreeing sound again, louder this time. It was almost a growl, but not aggressive. More like a firm denial of everything she just said. Lyra smiled despite herself and reached out to scratch behind his ears. He leaned into the touch like any domestic dog seeking affection, and something about that simple response made her chest ache. "It's okay," she told him softly. "I'm used to being forgotten. I'm used to being the girl no one wants. It's better than being remembered as the ghost girl, the cursed one, the Omega who was too pale to love. At least if I'm forgotten, I'm not actively hurting anyone with my existence." The wolf made that sound again, even louder. Several of the other wolves stirred in their sleep, ears twitching in her direction. She got the distinct impression they were listening even in slumber, and that they didn't like what she was saying. "You're very opinionated for someone who can't talk," Lyra observed with a hint of humor. She scratched under his chin and he tilted his head to give her better access. "But thank you for caring, even if it's just for tonight. Even if tomorrow you go back to your pack and I go. Wherever people like me go when we run out of places to run." She didn't have an answer to that question. Didn't want to think about what came after this cave, after this storm, after this strange night with 12 white wolves who'd let her help them. So she kept singing instead, kept feeding the fire, kept checking wounds and breathing and heart rates with hands that were finally warm enough to feel again. Kept watch as the hours crawled by and the storm raged and the wolves slept in their protective circle around her. Dawn came slowly, the gray light seeping into the cave inch by inch, like it was reluctant to disturb the peace they'd found. The blizzard was finally breaking, the wind dying down to occasional gusts, the snow falling in lazy flakes instead of the driving sheets that had nearly killed her. Lyra had made it through the night. More importantly, all 12 wolves were still alive. Their breathing was steady, their body temperatures had stabilized. Even the injured ones were showing signs of healing faster than she would have expected, their supernatural wolf constitutions doing what human bodies never could. Relief made her dizzy. She'd done it. She'd actually saved them all. She was checking the last wolf's bandages, making sure nothing had loosened during the night when she felt it. A shimmer in the air, a surge of power that made her small Omega wolf press against her consciousness in automatic submission. The 12 white wolves were shifting. Lyra scrambled backward instinctively, giving them space as their forms blurred and reformed. The transformation was beautiful in a way that hurt to watch, like witnessing something sacred and terrible and utterly beyond human understanding. Nature and magic combining to reshape reality itself. 12 men emerged where the wolves had been. They were all large and powerfully built, all with platinum blonde or white blonde hair that marked them as northern wolves adapted to the harsh climates. Their bodies bore the scars of warriors' stories written in scar tissue and old wounds. And they were completely naked, which made Lyra immediately avert her gaze with a squeak of embarrassment, her cheeks burning hot. "Sorry," she stammered, staring very hard at the cave wall. I should go. I'll leave you to get dressed and stay. The voice was deep and commanding, carrying so much alpha power that Lyra froze mid-turn, her body responding to the order before her mind could process it. Please, the voice added gentler now. Stay. Lyra slowly turned back, keeping her eyes carefully fixed on faces rather than anything lower. The men had arranged themselves into a protective formation, with the largest at the center, and he was looking at her with those same ice-blue eyes she'd been staring into all night. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, broad shoulders and a warrior's build that spoke of years spent training and fighting. His hair was platinum blonde so pale it was almost white, and fell to his shoulders in thick waves that somehow managed to look deliberately styled despite sleeping in a cave. Those ice-blue eyes were the palest blue she'd ever seen. Like glaciers at dawn, like winter sky at its coldest. He had a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of pale stubble, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and the kind of face that belonged on ancient statues of warrior kings. His body was covered in scars, claw marks, blade wounds, burns each one telling a story of survival. He looked like something out of legend, like a warrior prince from old tales. And there was something about him, some quality of power and presence, that made Lyra's Omega Wolf want to submit and bow and offer her throat in surrender. My name is Kyle, he said, his voice still carrying that note of command, but controlled, now measured. I'm Alpha King of the Glacier Throne Kingdom. These are my elite guard, the 12 finest warriors in my realm. His ice-blue eyes never left hers as he spoke, and Lyra found she couldn't look away. And we owe you our lives. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Alpha King. She'd sheltered the Alpha King himself. The most powerful wolf in the entire Northern Territories had spent the night with his head in her lap while she sang him lullabies and called him a good boy. The ruler of everything north of the Great Mountains had let her pet his ears and check his injuries like he was a common dog. I didn't know, she said quickly, panic making her words tumble over each other. I mean, I knew you were elite guard. I could tell from how you moved and positioned yourselves. But I didn't know you were. I'm so sorry if I did anything inappropriate. I just wanted to help. I didn't mean any disrespect. I would never. Inappropriate. One of the guards, a younger man with silver white hair and gray eyes that sparkled with mischief, laughed warmly. The sound echoed off the cave walls, dispelling some of the tension. You saved our lives. He continued, his smile genuine and kind. You found shelter when we were lost and dying. You built a fire when we were freezing. You treated our injuries with supplies you had to scavenge while you yourself were injured and exhausted. You stayed awake all night, keeping watch so we could rest safely. That's not inappropriate. That's extraordinary. Another guard spoke up, this one with hair the color of fresh snow and eyes like chips of blue ice. His voice was serious but warm. Most people would have run the moment they saw us. Elite guards are intimidating even when we're healthy and whole. You saw 12 massive injured wolves in a cave, and your first instinct was to help. That takes courage most warriors don't have. Kale was still watching her with that intense gaze that felt like it was seeing straight through her skin to her soul. What's your name? He asked. Lyra, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I was from Silver Mist Pack until yesterday. Kale's eyes narrowed dangerously, and suddenly the temperature in the cave seemed to drop several degrees. He repeated, and there was ice in his voice now. What happened yesterday? Lyra hesitated. There was no point in hiding it. He was the Alpha King. If he wanted to know her story, he'd find out anyway. And after everything that had happened, she was too tired to lie, too exhausted to pretend. I was rejected by my intended mate, she said quietly, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. He said I was too pale, too strange, cursed by the moon goddess. The Alpha banished me immediately, told me to be gone before sunset or face execution for trespassing. I was trying to find somewhere to go when the blizzard hit. I got lost, and then I felt this pull like something was calling me, and I found the cave. Found you. Silence fell over the cave. The guards were all watching her now, their expressions ranging from shock to anger to something that might have been sympathy. They banished you for your appearance. The silver-haired guard sounded outraged, his voice rising with righteous anger. That's barbaric. That's completely illegal under Northern law. Every pack in this territory knows that appearance-based rejection is grounds for Alpha challenge. It doesn't matter, Lyra said quietly, wrapping her arms around herself against a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I have nowhere to go anyway. No family, no pack, no one who wants me. I was just walking, hoping maybe I'd find somewhere that would take me in, or that I'd die quickly and it would all be over. Kale stood in one fluid motion, and even naked, he managed to look regal and commanding. Several of the guards quickly moved to give him a cloak from their recovered supplies, which he wrapped around his waist with practiced efficiency. He crossed to where Lyra sat by the dying fire, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact as he loomed over her. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. The raw power radiating off him made her Omega Wolf whimper and press low. "You found shelter," Kale said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "You found us. And I think that was exactly what the moon goddess intended." He dropped to one knee in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level, and Lyra's mind struggled to process the sight of an Alpha King kneeling to a rejected Omega nobody. "I've been searching for 2 years," he said, those ice blue eyes boring into hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Searching for an Omega who meets very specific requirements. She has to be compassionate enough to help strangers without expecting reward, strong enough to survive impossible situations without breaking, brave enough to face danger without flinching." He paused, and something shifted in his expression, something warm and wondering and achingly hopeful. "And she has to have the gift of Pathfinder." Lyra blinked at him, confusion cutting through her exhaustion. "Pathfinder," she repeated. "What's that?" "The ability to find safety when all seems lost." Kale explained, his voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting old lore. "To sense the right path even when every direction looks wrong. It's a rare gift, one that manifests in moments of desperate need. You found this cave in a blizzard when you were dying, Lyra. You found the supplies we needed to survive. You knew exactly how to keep us alive, without any training or guidance beyond basic healing knowledge." He leaned forward slightly, and she could see the hope blazing in his eyes, now bright and fierce and almost painful to witness. "That wasn't luck. That was your gift awakening to save you, and through you to save us." Lyra stared at him, her mind reeling. A gift. She had a gift. All these years she'd thought her instincts were just survival mechanisms, desperate adaptations of an unwanted child learning to read danger. But Kyle was saying it was something more, something rare, something valuable. "The Pathfinder gift only manifests in one bloodline," Kale continued, his voice dropping even lower. "An ancient royal line that was thought lost 23 years ago. House Silvermoon. The last known Pathfinders were the king and queen who died in an assassination along with their infant daughter." He looked at her hair, her skin, her eyes, taking in every detail of her appearance with new understanding. Or so everyone believed. The implication hung in the air between them. Lyra shook her head, rejecting it even as part of her desperately wanted it to be true. "That's impossible," she said. "I'm nobody. An orphan left at Silver Mist's border with nothing but a thin blanket. My parents abandoned me. They didn't want me any more than anyone else ever has." "Or," Kale said gently, "they were fleeing assassins and left you somewhere safe. Somewhere hidden. Somewhere the killers would never think to look. And they died protecting the secret of where you were." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused from sword work, and his touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "I've been searching for a Luna," he said, and every other sound in the cave seemed to fade away until it was just his voice and her heartbeat. "Someone worthy of standing beside me, of helping me lead the Northern Territories. Someone who sees those in need and helps without hesitation or calculation. Someone who leads with heart rather than power." His thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her throat tight. "And I've found her. I've found you." Behind him, every single one of his elite guard dropped to one knee in perfect synchronization. The movement was military, precise, formal, and absolutely stunning in its coordination. 12 of the finest warriors in the realm kneeling to a rejected Omega nobody. "I've been searching for a Luna," Kel repeated, his voice carrying to fill the cave now. "Someone worthy, someone true, someone who chose compassion over self-preservation, who stayed awake all night to keep strangers safe, who sang to us like we were precious, who gave everything she had without asking for anything in return." He held out his hand, palm up, an offering, a choice. "Be my Luna," he said simply. "Be my mate. Stand beside me and help me build a territory where wolves like you are valued, not cast out, where compassion is rewarded, not punished, where being different is celebrated as a gift, not condemned as a curse, where no child ever has to grow up feeling unwanted or unloved the way you did." Lyra's mind was spinning, tumbling, unable to catch hold of any single thought. Yesterday morning, she'd been standing in a borrowed dress, being publicly destroyed. Yesterday afternoon, she'd been walking into a blizzard expecting to die. Last night, she'd been singing lullabies to wolves in a cave, certain it would be her last act on Earth. And now an Alpha King is kneeling before her, offering her everything she'd ever wanted and never dared to dream of. It was too much, too fast, too impossible to be real. I need time, she said, her voice shaking so badly she could barely form words. I need to think. Of course, Kale said immediately, his hand still extended, but his expression understanding. You've been through trauma. You need time to process, to heal, to decide what you want without pressure or coercion. I'm not asking you to accept right now. He smiled, and it transformed his face from imposing king to something warmer, more human, more real. I'm asking you to come back to my territory, to see what life could be like, to get to know me and my pack before you make any decisions. Would that be acceptable? Lyra looked at him, at the hope in his eyes, at the 12 elite guards still kneeling, still waiting for her answer, at the choice being offered with an open hand and no pressure, no demands, no expectations beyond willingness to try. She thought about the alternative, walking back into the blizzard, dying alone and frozen, having her last moments be filled with fear and pain and the certainty that she'd never mattered to anyone. She thought about the cave, about staying awake all night beside wolves who trusted her, about singing in the darkness, about the moment when the largest wolf had pressed his head into her lap and let her pet him like he was precious. She thought about belonging, about having a place, about maybe possibly being wanted for the first time in her life. Okay, she whispered, I'll come with you. I'll see your territory and meet your pack. But I'm making no promises about being your Luna. I need to see if this is real first. If you truly mean what you're saying, if I can actually believe in this. The smile that spread across Kale's face was radiant. Pure joy mixed with relief, mixed with something that looked dangerously close to reverence. That's all I ask, he said. Thank you, Lyra, for everything, for saving our lives, for giving me hope, for being willing to try. He stood and pulled her up with him, steady and strong. The other 11 guards rose as well, their movements perfectly synchronized. The silver-haired one grinned at her mischief, dancing in his gray eyes. Welcome to the beginning of your new life, Luna, he said. It's going to be one hell of a ride. And despite everything, despite the exhaustion and fear and lingering disbelief, Lyra found herself smiling back. Maybe, just maybe, the moon goddess hadn't abandoned her after all. Maybe she'd been leading Lyra here all along. To this cave. To these wolves. To this Alpha King who looked at her like she was something precious instead of something cursed. To the possibility that rejection wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning. The journey down from the mountains took 3 days. KL and his elite guard had supplies cached at strategic points along the route, hidden in rock formations and hollow trees. Military planning at its finest. By midday of the first day, they'd retrieved closed provisions, proper medical supplies, and weapons that made the 12 guards look even more formidable than they had as wolves. Lyra walked among them, feeling small and out of place. They moved with the synchronized precision of soldiers who'd trained together for years. Every step was purposeful. Every glance around the forest was tactical. They were a single organism with 13 parts, and she was the odd piece that didn't quite fit. But they tried to make her fit anyway. The silver-haired guard who'd laughed in the cave introduced himself properly as Blaze. He was the pack's master tracker, able to follow a trail 3 days old through rain and wind. He walked beside Lyra for most of the first morning, keeping up a steady stream of conversation that required minimal responses. Stories about tracking rogues, about following deer through impossible terrain, about the time he'd tracked a stolen artifact all the way to the coast by following a scent weeks old. You have good instincts, he told her as they navigated a narrow path along a cliff edge. The way you found that cave, found the supplies, knew exactly what to do. That's Pathfinder gift, yeah, but it's also just good sense. Paying attention, trusting yourself. He grinned at her mischief, lighting his gray eyes. And you've got guts. Scolding an Alpha King for hiding his injuries, I've seen full-grown alphas wet themselves in Kale's presence. You pet him like a bone and told him leaders bleed too. That's Luna material, right there. Lyra felt her cheeks heat. I didn't know he was... Doesn't matter, Blaze interrupted cheerfully. You treated him like a person who needed help, not like a title that needed worshiping. That's exactly what he's been looking for. Someone who sees the man, not the crown. By afternoon, another guard had taken Blaze's place. This one introduced himself as Cinder, the pack's healer. He was quieter than Blaze with gentle hands and a careful way of moving that reminded Lyra of old Thea. His hair was pure white, his eyes a soft gray, and he carried himself with the calm assurance of someone who'd seen every injury imaginable and knew exactly how to fix it. "Tell me about your training," he said as they walked. Not a demand, a request, an invitation to share. So Lyra told him about old Thea, about learning herbs and healing in the orphan house, about the limited supplies they'd had, how she'd learned to make do with what was available, how Thea had taught her that healing was as much about comfort as medicine, about making people feel safe enough to let their bodies mend. Cinder listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he understood the gaps in her knowledge and was already thinking about how to fill them. "You have good instincts," he said, echoing Blaze's words. "The way you positioned the hypothermic wolves closest to the fire, the way you cleaned wounds with melted snow when you had no other option, the way you rationed the firewood to last all night. You were working with almost nothing and you saved 12 lives. That's skill, not luck." He smiled at her, warm and genuine. "I'd be honored to teach you more. Our healing halls have resources you've never seen, herbs from across the territories, books documenting every treatment. If you stay, if you become Luna, you could learn everything. Become one of the finest healers in the North." The offer made Lyra's throat tight. Education, resources, the chance to learn more than just desperate survival healing. It was everything she'd never dared to want. By the time they made camp that first night, Lyra had met more of the 12 guards. Each one took time to walk with her, to talk with her, to make her feel like she mattered, like she was already part of the pack instead of a stranger they'd just met. Granite the strategist was a quiet man with dark platinum hair and calculating gray-blue eyes. He asked her about Silver Mist's pack structure, their defenses, their leadership style. Not interrogation, just genuine curiosity about where she'd come from. Creek the scout was small and wiry, and moved with a speed that seemed supernatural. He ranged ahead constantly, always checking the path, always making sure they were safe. But he'd circle back periodically to check on Lyra, specifically his gray eyes kind, as he asked if she needed rest or water or anything at all. Falcon the lookout had the keenest eyes Lyra had ever seen. He spotted a deer 300 yards away through dense forest, saw storm clouds gathering hours before the rain hit, and he saw Lyra limping slightly from blisters and immediately called for a rest stop without making a big production of it. Titan was the largest of the guards, living up to his name with a body like a mountain and a quiet demeanor that belied his size. He carried supplies that would have broken other men's backs, but when Lyra's pack straps broke, he fixed them with hands that were surprisingly gentle for their size. That first night, they made camp in a sheltered valley with a clear stream running through it. The guards set up with military efficiency perimeter checks, fire building, food preparation, all happening simultaneously. Lyra tried to help, but Blaze waved her toward a fallen log that had been positioned as a seat. "You spent all night keeping watch over us," he said firmly. "Tonight, we keep watch over you. Sit, rest. Let us take care of you for once." So Lyra sat and watched them work. Watched the easy camaraderie between warriors who'd fought together, bled together, trusted each other with their lives. Watched Kale move among them, not as a king demanding service, but as a leader working alongside his people. He helped Cinder prepare food, joked with Blaze about a training mishap from years ago, listened seriously when Granite reported on the path ahead. He was part of the team, not above it, and that made him more intimidating somehow, more real. When dinner was ready, rabbit stew with wild herbs that Cinder gathered, the guards arranged themselves in a loose circle around the fire. They left a space next to Kale clearly meant for Lyra. She sat down carefully, hyper-aware of his presence beside her, of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool evening air. "Tell me about your childhood," Kale said quietly as they ate. The others were talking among themselves, giving them a bubble of privacy. "About the orphan house, about how you survived being unwanted for so long." So Lyra told him about the big dormitory room with 30 narrow beds, about learning to be invisible so the other children wouldn't target her for being different, about the few friends she'd made who hadn't cared about her appearance, about old Thea's kindness and the way it had kept Lyra from giving up entirely. She told him about presenting as an Omega at 16 and the hope that had bloomed and died over 7 years, about being assigned to Torin when no one else would take her, about convincing herself that duty could become affection eventually if she just tried hard enough. "I was good at convincing myself of impossible things," Lyra said softly, staring into the fire. "Good at making the best of situations that couldn't be fixed. I thought that was strength. But maybe it was just cowardice, being too afraid to demand better." "That's not cowardice," Kale said, his voice firm. That's survival. You did what you had to do to live in a hostile environment, and there's no shame in that. He set his bowl aside and turned to face her more fully. But you don't have to settle anymore. You don't have to make the best of being unwanted. You can demand better now. You can choose what you want instead of accepting whatever scraps others decide to give you. His ice blue eyes caught the firelight, making them glow almost silver. And if what you want is to walk away from all this to find your own path without a pack or a king or expectations you never asked for, I'll respect that. I'll make sure you have supplies and safe passage and enough resources to start fresh wherever you choose. The offer was genuine. Lyra could see it in his face, hear it in his voice. He would let her go, would help her go, would give her the freedom she'd never had before, which made the choice to stay feel like an actual choice instead of another trap. Tell me about you, Lyra said instead of responding to his offer. About how you became Alpha King at 23. About what you've been doing for 5 years. Something flickered across Kale's face. Pain quickly controlled. He was quiet for a long moment, and Lyra thought he might not answer. But then he spoke, his voice low and measured. My parents were good leaders, strong but fair. They'd ruled the Glacier Throne Kingdom for 30 years, building alliances, maintaining peace. I was training to eventually take over, but we thought I had decades before that happened. He paused, jaw tight. 5 years ago, they were attending a summit with neighboring pacts, border negotiations, standard diplomatic work. Someone poisoned the wine. 23 wolves died that night, including my parents. It was meant to look like bad provisions and accident. But our healer found traces of wolfsbane that only grows in one specific region. Assassination, Lyra breathed. Assassination, Kale confirmed. We never found who ordered it. The investigation hit dead ends everywhere we looked. Whoever planned it was smart, careful, protected. And suddenly I was 23 years old and ruling a kingdom that spanned half the northern territories, trying to hold together alliances my parents had spent 3 decades building. He looked at her then, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. I've been alone for 5 years, leading alone, deciding alone. Every Omega the council pushed at me was interested in the crown, not the man wearing it. They saw power and status and the chance to be queen. None of them saw me. His hand moved toward hers where it rested on the log between them, then stopped. Asking permission without words. Lyra turned her palm up, an invitation. Kale's fingers laced through hers, warm and calloused and steady. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, made her Omega wolf purr with contentment at the connection. You saw me in that cave, he said quietly, when I was just an injured wolf who needed help. You didn't know I was king, didn't care about status or power. You just saw someone suffering and chose to help. That's what I've been searching for. Someone who sees the person before the title. Lyra's throat was tight. I can't promise I'll be a good Luna. I don't know anything about leadership or politics or running a kingdom. I've spent my whole life being invisible, being nobody. I don't know how to be somebody. You already are somebody, Kale said firmly. You're Lyra, the woman who saved 12 lives, the woman who stayed awake all night to keep strangers safe, the woman who sang in the darkness and made it less frightening. That's not nobody, that's extraordinary. He squeezed her hand gently. And I don't need you to know everything right now. I need you to be willing to learn, to try, to see if maybe possibly we could build something together. The space between them felt charged electric. Lyra was acutely aware of how close he was, of the heat of his body, of the way his eyes had dropped to her mouth for just a second before returning to meet her gaze. He was going to kiss her. She could see the intention forming, see him leaning incrementally closer. And then she panicked. Lyra pulled back slightly, breaking the moment. I need time, she said again, her voice shaking. I can't. This is all so fast. Yesterday I was dying in a blizzard. Today, you're talking about building a future together. I need time to process everything. Kale pulled back immediately, putting space between them, though he didn't let go of her hand. Of course, he said, and there was no hurt in his voice, just understanding and patience. Take all the time you need. There's no rush, no pressure. We have weeks, months, years if that's what you need. He smiled, soft and genuine. I've waited 2 years to find you. I can wait as long as it takes for you to be ready. That night, Lyra slept in a tent the guards erected for her. Warm blankets, soft bedding, the sound of warriors keeping watch, keeping her safe. She should have felt secure. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the canvas above her, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she tried and failed? What if the pack rejected her the same way Silver Mist had? What if she let herself hope and it was destroyed again? What if this was all some elaborate test that she was failing right now by being too afraid to leap? Outside the tent, she heard the guards changing watch, heard Kyle's voice low and warm checking on his people, making sure everyone was comfortable and safe. He was a good leader, a good man, and he seemed to genuinely believe she could be his partner in ruling. Lyra wanted desperately to believe him, but 23 years of rejection had taught her that wanting something didn't make it real. The second day of travel brought them out of the mountains and into rolling foothills. The landscape changed from rocky peaks to pine forests, from barren stone to snow-covered meadows. The weather was still cold, but the sun broke through clouds periodically, turning the snow into fields of diamonds. Lyra met the rest of the elite guard as they walked, each one as different as the first six, each one making an effort to welcome her. Shadow was the stealth expert, able to move so quietly that Lyra frequently startled when he appeared beside her. But he had a gentle sense of humor, and he taught her tricks for walking silently through snow. Raven was the diplomat, smooth-voiced and clever, able to diffuse tension with carefully chosen words. He told her stories about negotiations that had averted wars, about finding common ground between enemies. Wraith was the intelligence officer, quiet and observant. He saw everything, missed nothing, and his pale gray eyes seemed to catalog every detail. But when Lyra stumbled on a hidden route, he was the one who caught her elbow and steadied her with surprising gentleness. Blade was the weapons master, carrying more knives than seemed physically possible. He showed Lyra how to spot danger in terrain, how to use environment as protection, how to think tactically even without combat training. Storm was the weather specialist, with hair like thunderclouds and eyes that could read the sky. He could predict changes hours before they arrived, had saved the team countless times by finding shelter before deadly conditions hit. He walked with Lyra mid-afternoon of the second day, teaching her to read cloud patterns. "See how those clouds are stacking? That means snow within 3 hours," he said, pointing at the horizon. "Your Pathfinder gift probably feels it instinctively, but knowing the signs helps you trust what you're sensing." Ash was the demolitions expert and siege specialist, with ash-gray hair and a quiet intensity. Despite his dangerous specialty, he was gentle with Lyra, showing her how to identify unstable terrain, how to recognize when a path was safe or treacherous. By noon of the second day, all 12 guards had introduced themselves properly, and Lyra realized what they were doing. They were courting her on Kael's behalf. Not romantically, that was for Kael alone, but they were showing her what pack meant, what belonging looked like, what it would feel like to be part of something larger than herself. They were showing her family. That afternoon, as they rested beside a half-frozen stream, Blaze sat down next to Lyra with 2 mugs of hot tea that Cinder had brewed. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his usual humor tempered by something more serious. Lyra nodded, accepting the mug and wrapping her cold hands around it gratefully. "We've all been through that cave test," Blaze said quietly. "All of us. Before Kael made us elite guard, we had to prove we'd put the pack before ourselves, that we'd help someone in need even when it cost us something." He took a sip of his tea, steam rising in the cold air. "I found 3 Omega pups abandoned in a blizzard 6 years ago. They'd been cast out from their pack for being twins, and a triplet bad luck, some packs believe. I was on a scouting mission. I could have kept going, finished my task, come back for them later. But I knew later would be too late, so I carried all 3 of them back, mission be damned." He smiled, but it was tinged with old pain. "Kael didn't punish me for abandoning orders. He made me elite guard because I'd made the right choice. The human choice. And those 3 pup, they're alive and thriving in our pack now. I see them every day. 2 are training to be scouts. 1's studying healing with Cinder." He looked at Lyra directly. "What I'm saying is, we understand what you did in that cave. We've all been there, faced that choice between self-preservation and helping others. We all chose help. That makes you one of us already, whether you wear a crown or not." Lyra's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet," Blaze said with a return of his usual mischief. "Wait until you see what living with 12 overprotective warriors is actually like. We're going to be insufferable." Despite everything, Lyra laughed. It felt good, natural, like maybe she could do this after all. That evening, they camped within sight of the Glacier Throne Kingdom. Lyra could see it in the distance, built into the side of a massive glacier that caught the setting sun and turned it into fire and gold. Ice and stone structures rising in impossible architecture. It looked like something from a fairy tale. like a place that couldn't possibly be real. That's home, Kale said softly, coming to stand beside her as she stared at the distant city. That's where we're going tomorrow. It's beautiful, Lyra breathed. It will be yours if you choose it, Kale said. Every building, every person, every tradition and responsibility. The good and the difficult both. I won't lie to you and pretend being Luna is easy. It's demanding, it's exhausting. It requires strength and patience and the ability to make hard choices. He turned to face her, his expression serious. But I think you have all of that already. You've survived things that would have broken most people. You've maintained your compassion despite every reason to become bitter. You've stayed kind when the world was cruel. That's the strength I need in a partner. Lyra looked up at him, at this alpha king who kept choosing her despite having every other option in the world. What if I can't do it? She whispered. What if I try and I'm not enough? Then we figure it out together, Kale said simply. You won't be alone in this, Lyra. I'll be beside you. The guards will support you. The whole pack will help you learn. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to try. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of her pale hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it made her chest ache. I believe in you, he said quietly, even if you don't believe in yourself yet. I see your worth, your strength, your potential, and I'll keep believing in you until you can believe in yourself. This time, when he leaned closer, when the intention to kiss her was clear, Lyra didn't pull away. She let him close the distance between them, let his lips touch hers in a kiss that was gentle and questioning and full of restrained desire. It lasted only a moment before Kale pulled back, searching her face for any sign of discomfort or regret. Lyra's heart was racing, her omega wolf singing with joy at the contact. But her mind was still tangled with fear and doubt and the lingering certainty that good things didn't happen to her. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, Kale said. I'm scared too. Scared of disappointing you. Scared of not being what you need. Scared that I'm pushing too hard or not hard enough. But I think that's normal when something matters this much. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe. Tomorrow we arrive at Glacier Throne. You'll meet the pack, see the city, start learning what Luna means. And if at any point you decide it's not what you want, you can leave. No judgment, no punishment. Just leave if you need to. You'd really let me go? Lyra asked. Yes, Kale said simply, because keeping you against your will would make me a tyrant, not a partner. And I want a partner, Lyra. I want someone who chooses to stand beside me, who wants to be there. Forcing you would poison everything we could build together. That night, Lyra slept better than she had the night before. Her dreams were filled with ice palaces and gentle kisses and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd found where she belonged. Matam. They arrived at the Glacier Throne Kingdom just after dawn on the third day. The city was even more spectacular up close. Buildings carved from ice itself stood alongside traditional stone structures, all of it designed to work with the natural glacier rather than against it. Streets wound between structures in organic patterns. Gardens of ice sculptures caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the snow. And the people. Hundreds of them poured out of buildings as word spread that the Alpha King had returned. They lined the streets calling greetings, asking if the scouting mission had been successful, if everyone was safe. Their hair ranged from platinum blonde to pure white to silver gray. Their eyes were pale blues and grays and greens. They looked like winter personified, beautiful and strong and adapted to harsh climates. They looked like Lyra. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the strange one, wasn't too pale or too different. She fit the aesthetic perfectly, and the relief of that hit her like a physical blow. Make way, Blaze called out cheerfully as they walked through the streets. The Alpha King returns, and he's brought someone special. The crowd pressed closer, curious and excited. Lyra felt panic rising. Too many people, too much attention, too fast. But Kael moved closer to her, and the 12 guards formed a loose protective circle that kept the crowd from overwhelming her. They're excited, Kael said softly. We've been without a Luna for 5 years. They're hoping you're the one we've been searching for. What if I disappoint them? Lyra whispered. You won't, Kael said with absolute certainty. They reached a massive structure built into the glacier itself. The Ice Palace, Lyra realized. This was Kael's home, the seat of power for the entire kingdom. The doors opened and an elderly woman stepped out. She had white hair braided in a crown around her head, warm gray eyes, and a presence that commanded immediate respect. She wore robes that marked her as someone important, a healer or advisor, Lyra guessed. About time you got home, the woman said. though her voice was warm with affection. 3 days overdue and not a word about where you were. I was about to send out search parties. We ran into a blizzard, Elspeth, Cale said, and then we ran into something even more important. He placed a hand on Lyra's lower back, gentle and proprietary, guiding her forward. This is Lyra. She saved our lives, and I believe she's the Luna we've been searching for. Elspeth's eyes went wide, and then a smile spread across her face that transformed her from imposing advisor to warm grandmother. Moon goddess be praised, she said. Child, come here and let me look at you. Lyra stepped forward hesitantly. Elspeth took both her hands in a grip that was surprisingly strong, examining her face with keen attention. Silver moon blood, Elspeth murmured. I'd recognize it anywhere. The hair, the eyes, the bone structure. Oh, child, we've been waiting for you. I don't understand, Lyra said. You will, Elspeth promised. But first you must be exhausted. Let's get you settled, get you warm and fed. There will be time for explanations once you've rested. She led Lyra into the palace, chattering about arrangements and preparations about how the Luna's quarters had been kept ready for 2 years, just in case about all the things Lyra would need. The interior of the ice palace was breathtaking. Walls of clear ice shot through with veins of silver, floors polished smooth as glass, furniture carved from stone and wood, practical but beautiful, and everywhere light. The ice caught sunlight and reflected. It multiplied, it filled every space with radiance. Elspeth showed her to a suite of rooms that were larger than the entire orphan house had been. Bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom with a massive tub carved from stone, windows that looked out over the city and the mountains beyond. This is yours, Elspeth said simply, whether you accept the Luna position or not. Cale has instructed that you're to be treated as an honored guest with full access to everything in the kingdom. You're not a prisoner. You're not obligated. You're free to explore, to learn, to decide what you want. She squeezed Lyra's hands one more time. Rest today. Tomorrow we'll begin showing you what Luna means. But for now, just breathe. You're safe here. You're wanted here. And whatever you decide, you will always have a home in Glacier Throne if you need one. After Elspeth left, Lyra stood in the center of her new rooms and tried to process everything. 24 hours ago, she'd been in a cave singing to wolves. 72 hours ago, she'd been dying in a blizzard. 4 days ago, she'd been publicly rejected and banished. And now she stood in a palace in rooms meant for a queen, being told she was wanted and valued and enough. It felt like a dream, like something that would dissolve if she examined it too closely. But the stone floor was solid under her feet. The ice walls were real and cold when she touched them. The view from the window showed a city full of people who looked like her, who might actually accept her. Maybe it wasn't a dream after all. Maybe it was just the beginning of something real. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of learning and adjusting, and slowly starting to believe that this might actually be permanent. Elspeth became her constant companion, teaching her everything about being Luna. Council meetings where she sat quietly and learned how decisions were made. Pack mediations where she discovered her natural empathy helped resolve conflicts that had seemed intractable. Territory management, resource allocation, diplomatic correspondence with neighboring packs. You have good instincts, Elspeth told her on the 4th day as they reviewed requests for aid from border settlements. You see the human element in policy decisions. That's rare in leaders. Most get caught up in resources and strategy and forget that every decision affects real people. Lyra also discovered she had a talent for healing that went beyond what old Thea had taught her. Elspeth took her to the healing halls on the 7th day, and Lyra spent hours there learning about herbs. She'd never seen treatments. She'd never imagined magical healing techniques that combined pack medicine with Pathfinder intuition. Your gift helps you find what people need, Cinder explained, as they worked together treating a child who'd broken his arm. Not just paths through physical space, but paths to healing. You knew instinctively how to position us for optimal recovery in that cave. That's Pathfinder healing site, extremely rare. But the best parts of those 2 weeks were the small moments, the cozy interludes that had nothing to do with leadership or responsibility or being Luna. On the 5th day, the Omega Collective invited her to join them baking bread. 8 Omegas ranging in age from 16 to 70, all of them warm and welcoming, teaching her recipes and telling stories and treating her like she'd always been part of their group. We heard you sang to the Alphaking like he was a pup, one of them, a middle-aged Omega named Marin, said with twinkling eyes. We haven't stopped teasing him about it. You sang to him, another Omega gasped. What did you sing? So Lyra told them about the cave, about staying awake, about singing every song she could remember to keep herself alert, and the wolves comforted. And they laughed and asked her to sing for them, and she did, and they harmonized with her, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she was part of something communal and female and safe. On the 10th day, she spent the afternoon playing with pups in the snow. 20 small children, ranging from 3 to 8 years old, all of them calling her Luna, with innocent certainty, all of them wanting her to build snow structures and tell stories and watch them practice their shifting. A little girl with white blonde hair and gray eyes climbed into Lyra's lap and looked up at her seriously. "Are you going to be our Luna forever?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Lyra said honestly. "I'm still deciding if I can do it." "Oh, you can," the girl said with absolute conviction. "You're nice and you're pretty and you don't yell." And the Alpha King smiles now when he didn't before. "That means you're good for us." The simple faith in that statement made Lyra's throat tight, but it was the evenings with Kyle that she treasured most. Every night after dinner, he'd find her wherever she was, studying in the library, working in the healing halls, talking with pack members, and he'd ask if she wanted to walk in the ice gardens. And every night, Lyra said yes. They'd walk through crystalline sculptures that caught moonlight and threw it in rainbow patterns across the snow. And they'd talk about everything and nothing, about his day and hers, about memories and hopes and fears, about what Luna meant and whether she could ever really do it. "I met with the border settlement leaders today," Lyra told him on the 14th day as they walked past a sculpture of wolves running. "They're concerned about the rogue activity in the south. They want more guards stationed there." "What did you think?" Kale asked, not offering his opinion yet. Wanting hers first. "I think they're right to be concerned, but spreading guards too thin makes everyone more vulnerable. Maybe instead of more guards, we train the settlement wolves in better defense, give them resources to protect themselves, rather than making them dependent on external protection." Kale smiled warm and proud. "That's exactly what I was thinking. You see the practical solution that preserves both safety and autonomy. That's good leadership, Lyra." He reached for her hand and she let him take it. This had become natural over the past 2 weeks, walking hand in hand through the gardens, standing close enough to feel each other's warmth. Small touches that built trust and connection without pressure for more. "I talked to the Omega Collective today," Lyra said. "They told me about the communal raising system here, how pups are cared for by the whole pack, not just their birth parents. I've never seen anything like it. It's beautiful." "That was my mother's innovation," Kale said quietly. "She believed no child should ever feel unwanted or unloved. So she created a system where every pup has dozens of adults who care for them, where Omegas who can't have children can still nurture, where birth parents have support instead of struggling alone." He squeezed her hand gently. "If you become Luna, you could build on that. Make it even better. Add your own innovations. Create a pack where every single person knows they belong." "That's a lot of pressure," Lyra said. "It's also a lot of opportunity," Kale countered. "A chance to make sure no child ever experiences what you experienced. That no one ever grows up feeling invisible or unwanted." They walked in silence for a while, and then Kale stopped beside a sculpture of two wolves touching noses. Mates, Lyra realized. The sculpture represented mated pairs. "I need to tell you something," Kale said, his voice serious, "and I need you to know I'm not saying it to pressure you, just to be honest about where I am." Lyra's heart started beating faster. "Okay. I'm falling in love with you," Kale said simply. "Maybe I started falling the moment I woke up and saw you exhausted and pale from staying awake all night to keep us safe. Maybe it was when you scolded me for hiding my injuries. Maybe it was when you sang in the darkness and made it less frightening." He turned to face her fully, his ice blue eyes intense in the moonlight. "I know it's only been 2 weeks. I know that's fast. But I also know my own heart, and I know that what I feel for you is real and deep and true. You're kind and strong and compassionate and brave. You see people truly see them. You care about suffering even when it costs you something. You're exactly what I've been searching for." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "But I also know you're still healing from rejection, still learning to trust that good things can be real. So I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just telling you where I am so you know. So there are no secrets between us." Lyra stared at him, her mind reeling. Love. He was falling in love with her. This Alpha King who could have anyone who had dozens of Omegas throwing themselves at him was choosing her, wanting her. "I don't know if I can love you back," she whispered. "I don't know if I remember how to love, or if I ever knew in the first place." "That's okay," Kyle said gently. "You don't have to know right now. You don't have to figure it all out today. Just keep being here. Keep trying. Keep letting me show you that you're worthy of love. The feelings will come or they won't, and either way we'll figure it out together. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness. I'm patient, he murmured against her skin. I can wait. That night, Lyra lay in her luxurious bed in her Luna suite and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being wanted, of being valued, of having someone willing to wait for her to heal instead of demanding she be whole immediately. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could be Luna. Maybe she could let herself love Kael and believe he loved her back. Maybe, just maybe, the moon goddess had led her exactly where she needed to be all along. On the 21st day, everything changed. Lyra was in the healing halls working with Cinder on a complicated tincture when Wraith appeared in the doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, but she'd learned to read the elite guards over the past 3 weeks. Something was wrong. Well, Lyra, he said quietly, the Alpha King requests your presence in the throne room immediately. Her stomach dropped. What's wrong? Visitors from Silver Mist Pack, Wraith said, led by your former intended mate. The world tilted. Torrin was here. Torrin had come to Glacier Throne, while Lyra followed Wraith through the palace on shaking legs. Other pack members watched her pass with concerned expressions, and she realized word had already spread. Everyone knew something significant was happening. The throne room was massive, carved from ice and stone, with a domed ceiling that magnified sound. Kael sat on his throne, a chair of ice and silver that managed to look both beautiful and intimidating. The 12 elite guards were arranged around him in formal positions, their expressions cold and dangerous. And in the center of the room, flanked by 10 Silver Mist warriors, stood Torrin. He looked exactly as Lyra remembered. Brown hair, brown eyes, stocky build. Sound. Nothing remarkable about him except the cruelty in his expression and the sneer that twisted his mouth when he saw her. There she is, Torrin said loudly, his voice carrying through the throne room. The Omega who belongs to Silver Mist Pack. She belongs to herself, Kael said coldly. State your business or leave my territory. Torrin smiled, and it was an ugly thing. I'm here to retrieve what's mine. The rejection ceremony was never completed according to proper pack law. I stated my refusal, but Alpha Darius never formally accepted it and released the bond. By northern law, Lyra is still promised to me, still bound to Silver Mist Pack, and you Alpha King have been harboring her illegally for 3 weeks. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. Still bound, still promised, still his. No, that couldn't be true. She'd been banished, cast out, told to leave or die. That's a lie, she said, her voice shaking. I was banished. Darius ordered me to leave before sunset or face execution. Banishment for failure to complete a mating bond, Torrin agreed smoothly. Not for breaking a bond that still exists. The ceremony was interrupted before completion. That means the promise remains until officially dissolved. He turned to Kael with a smug expression. By northern law, you must return her to Silver Mist Pack or face charges of Omega theft. And Omega theft, as I'm sure you know, is grounds for war. Silence filled the throne room. Lyra felt like she couldn't breathe. War. They were threatening war over her. Hundreds of wolves would die because she dared to hope for something better. Kael's expression was carved from ice. Dangerous and cold and absolutely furious. Your interpretation of law is convenient, he said, his voice deadly quiet. But even if what you say is true, Lyra is a person with agency. She has the right to choose where she goes and who she's with. I will not hand her over like property. Then you've declared war on Silver Mist Pack, Torrin said. Alpha Darius has 300 warriors ready to march. How many will die because you refuse to return one defective Omega? 300 warriors against Glacier Throne's forces. A war that would devastate both packs. Children would be orphaned. Mates would lose each other. Blood would soak the snow red. All because of her. Lyra felt the decision crystallize with painful clarity. She couldn't let this happen. Couldn't let people die because she dared to want something better. She'd spent her whole life being unwanted, being invisible, being nothing. Maybe that's all she was meant to be. I'll go, she said quietly. Every head in the throne room turned toward her. What? Kael said, standing from his throne. I'll go back to Silver Mist. Lyra repeated, her voice stronger now, even though she felt like she was dying inside. I won't let people die over me. I'm not worth a war. Yes, you are, Kael said fiercely, crossing to her in 3 long strides. You are worth fighting for, worth defending, worth everything. But I'm not worth hundreds of deaths, Lyra said, tears streaming down her face. I'm not worth children losing parents. I'm not worth mates losing each other. I've never been worth that much to anyone. She looked at Torin at his triumphant expression and felt something inside her shatter. I'll go, she said to him. I'll come back to Silvermist. But you have to swear that Alpha Darius will call off the threat, that there will be no war. Done, Torin said immediately. See, she chooses to return of her own free will. No theft, no violation of law. He held out his hand toward her like she was a dog being called to heel. Lyra took a step toward him, and Kale caught her arm. Don't, he said, and his voice was raw with desperation. Please, Lyra, don't do this. We'll find another way. We'll fight if we have to. But don't sacrifice yourself. Don't give up everything you've found here. I have to, Lyra whispered. I can't let people die for me. I won't. She pulled her arm free and took another step toward Torin. Wait, Elspeth's voice rang through the throne room, clear and commanding. She strode forward from where she'd been standing in the shadows holding something small in her hands. Before anyone makes irreversible decisions, Elspeth said, there's something Lyra needs to see, something that changes everything. She held out her hand, and in her palm lay a pendant, silver and tarnished with age but bearing a crest that was still clearly visible. A crescent moon over two crossed arrows, the symbol of House Silvermoon. I found this in the Healing Hall's records, Elspeth said. It came with Lyra 23 years ago when she was left at Silvermist's border. Somehow it ended up in our files. Old Thea must have sent it when she heard Lyra had survived and come here. She looked at Lyra directly. Do you know what this means, child? Do you understand what you're looking at? Lyra shook her head, mutely unable to speak. This is the crest of Silvermoon royalty, Elspeth said, her voice ringing with authority. House Silvermoon ruled the Northern Territories for 3 centuries before the assassination 23 years ago. King Aldrich and Queen Morwen and their infant daughter were all thought killed. She held up the pendant so everyone in the throne room could see it. But infant Princess Lyanna wasn't killed. She was smuggled out by her parents before the assassin struck, left somewhere safe, somewhere hidden, somewhere no one would think to look for royal blood. Elspeth's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Lyra isn't just a rejected Omega nobody. She's Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon, the rightful heir to the Northern Throne. And she has every right under ancient law to choose her own pack, her own mate, her own future. The throne room erupted into chaos. Torin was shouting denials. The Silvermist warriors were backing toward the doors. Kale's elite guard were moving to block exits. Pack members who'd gathered to watch were gasping and exclaiming and processing what this meant. But Lyra stood frozen, staring at the pendant, her mind refusing to accept what she was hearing. Princess, royalty, heir, not cursed, not worthless, not abandoned because she was unwanted, hidden because she was precious, protected because she was important, left behind because it was the only way to keep her alive. No, Torin said desperately, that's impossible. She's nobody. She's defective. She's a pathfinder. Kale said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. A gift that only manifests in Silvermoon bloodline. She found us in a blizzard, found supplies, found exactly what was needed to save 12 lives. That's not luck. That's royal blood awakening. He crossed to Lyra and took both her hands in his, forcing her to look at him. You are Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon, he said fiercely, heir to the Northern Throne, descendant of 3 centuries of rulers, and you have the right to choose who you mate with, who you stand beside, what future you build. He looked at Torin with ice in his eyes. And under ancient law, royal blood supersedes all pack claims. Any promise made under false pretenses like hiding someone's true identity is null and void. Lyra owes Silvermist nothing. She was never truly theirs. Torin's face had gone white. Alpha Darius will still march. He'll claim nothing, Kale interrupted coldly, because if he marches on Glacier Throne, he'll be declaring war on the rightful Silvermoon heir. And every pack in the Northern Territories will rise against him to protect royal blood. He knows this, which means his threats were always empty. Understanding crashed over Lyra like a wave. This had never been about incomplete ceremonies or pack law. This had been about something else entirely. He wanted war anyway, she said slowly. Darius was going to use me as an excuse to invade Glacier Throne. Whether I was bound to Torin or not, whether I came back or stayed here, he'd find a reason to march. She looked at Torin with new clarity. You rejected me publicly to give him that reason, to make me desperate enough to flee, to make me either die in the wilderness or become a way to start the war Darius wanted. This was planned from the beginning. Torrhen's silence was confirmation enough. Lyra felt rage building in her chest. Pure, clean fury, not at herself for being unwanted, at them for using her, for treating her like a pawn in their political games, for trying to turn her into an excuse for bloodshed. "Get out," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Get out of Glacier Throne. Tell Alpha Darius that Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon rejects any and all claims Silver Mist Pack has ever made on her. Tell him that if he marches, he'll face not just Glacier Throne, but every pack loyal to Silvermoon blood." Her eyes were glowing now, silver blue and bright with Pathfinder power fully awakened. "Tell him I choose Kyle. I choose Glacier Throne. I choose my own future. And if he has a problem with that, he can bring it to me personally, and I'll show him exactly what a Silvermoon Pathfinder can do." The temperature in the throne room dropped. Ice formed on the walls, spreading from where Lyra stood. Her power was manifesting physically, responding to her rage and her certainty. Torrhen and his warriors fled, practically running for the doors. And Lyra stood in the center of the throne room, glowing with power, surrounded by ice of her own creation, and finally believing in her own worth. She was not cursed. She was not worthless. She was not unwanted. She was Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon. And she chose KL. She chose Glacier Throne. She chose her own future. And nothing, not Torrhen, not Darius, not all of Silver Mist Pack combined, could take that choice away from her. The ice spread across the throne room floor in crystalline patterns, responding to Lyra's rage and newly awakened power. She stood at the center of it all, glowing with silver blue light, her Pathfinder gift manifesting in ways she'd never imagined possible. Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon. The words echoed in her mind, rewriting everything she'd believed about herself. Not cursed, not abandoned, not worthless, hidden, protected, loved enough that her parents had died to keep her safe. The throne room slowly quieted as pack members processed what they'd witnessed. Torrhen's hasty retreat, the revelation of royal blood, the display of power that had turned the air itself cold and made ice bloom like flowers across ancient stone. Kael approached her carefully, as if she were something fragile that might shatter. His ice-blue eyes were bright with wonder and pride, and something that looked dangerously close to worship. "Lyra," he said softly, stopping just within arm's reach. "You're glowing." She looked down at her hands and saw he was right. Silver blue light pulsed beneath her skin, in time with her heartbeat visible through her pale flesh like veins of starlight. The Pathfinder gift fully awakened after 23 years of dormancy. "I can see them," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear in equal measure. "Paths, hundreds of them, thousands, every possible future branching out like a tree made of light. I can see what happens if Darius marches, if he retreats, if we fight, if we negotiate." All of it at once. The light flared brighter, and suddenly everyone in the throne room gasped. They could see it too. Lyra was projecting the visions outward, sharing her gift with everyone present. In one path, war, blood soaking snow red, children crying over dead parents, mates torn apart by violence. Glacier Throne victorious but devastated, losing a third of their population. Silver Mist Pack destroyed, entirely absorbed into other territories, their name erased from history. In another path, retreat. Torrhen returning with lies claiming Lyra had been forcibly held. Darius using it as propaganda to turn other packs against Glacier Throne. Isolation. Trade embargoes. A slow strangulation of resources that would take years to overcome. In a third path, something different. Diplomacy. Truth. Lyra going to Silver Mist not as a prisoner, but as a Pathfinder, showing Darius exactly what his choices would cost. Alliance forged from understanding rather than fear. Peace built on mutual benefit rather than conquest. The visions faded and the light dimmed back to just Lyra's skin. She swayed, slightly exhausted by the power expenditure, and Kael caught her immediately. His arms came around her, steady and warm, grounding her in the present. "I know what we have to do," Lyra said quietly, "and you're not going to like it." Kael didn't like it. The 12 elite guards liked it even less. But Lyra was insistent, and she was right, and eventually they had no choice but to agree. They would go to Silver Mist Pack, not with an army, but with a delegation, Kael, Lyra, and the 12 guards. They would go under flag of truce and request audience with Alpha Darius, and Lyra would use her Pathfinder gift to show him the truth of what his choices would cost. "It's too dangerous," Blaze argued for the fourth time as they prepared to leave. "Darius could kill you the moment you arrive, could claim diplomatic immunity doesn't apply to a traitor, Omega." "I'm not a traitor, Omega," Lyra said calmly, adjusting the travel pack Cinder had prepared for her. I'm Princess Liana of House Silvermoon, and if Darius harms me, every pack in the Northern Territories will hunt him to extinction. He knows that. He won't risk it. You're gambling your life on his self-preservation, Granite pointed out. I'm gambling on my gifts showing me the right path, Lyra corrected. And the path says we go. We talk. We show him truth. And we forge peace instead of wading through blood to get it. Kyle had been silent through most of the debate, but now he crossed to her and took her hands in his. If we do this, he said quietly, we do it my way. You don't go alone with him. You don't let him separate you from us. The moment I sense danger, we leave. Agreed. Agreed, Lyra said. And after this is done, when we come home safe, you accept my proposal. Kale added, his voice dropping lower. You become my Luna officially. No more hesitation. No more doubt. You choose this. Choose us. Choose me. It wasn't really a question, but Lyra answered anyway. Yes, she said simply. When we come home, I'll accept. I'll be your Luna, your mate, your partner in all things. Kale kissed her, then deep and claiming and full of desperate relief. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Come home safe, he whispered. That's all I ask. Come home safe to me. I will, Lyra promised. I can see the path that leads there. I just have to trust it. No. The journey to Silver Mist Pack took 2 days. They traveled fast and light, the 12 guards moving in practice formation with Lyra and Kale protected at the center. No one spoke much. The weight of what they were attempting hung heavy over the group. On the evening of the first day, as they made camp in a pine forest that marked the border between territories, Elspeth appeared. She'd insisted on coming, despite her age, despite the danger, despite Kale's protests. Now she sat beside Lyra at the fire, warming her hands against the cold. Your mother had the same gift, Elspeth said quietly. Queen Morwen could see paths the way you do. She saved countless lives by steering the kingdom away from disasters before they happened. She was beloved for it. You knew her, Lyra asked. I was her personal healer, Elspeth said with a sad smile. I delivered you myself when you were born. 3 days old when they fled with you, leaving you at Silver Mist border, wrapped in a blanket that had been your mother's. They knew the assassins were coming. Morwen saw the paths. She saw that if they kept you, you'd die with them. But if they hid you, you might survive. She reached out and tucked a strand of Lyra's pale hair behind her ear, with a gesture so maternal it made Lyra's chest ache. She died knowing you lived. That was enough for her. She told me before they left. She'll find her way home eventually. Pathfinders always do. And she was right. You found your way here. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Lyra asked. When I first arrived, you must have recognized me. I suspected, Elspeth admitted. The hair, the eyes, the gift. But I couldn't be certain until I found the pendant. And I wanted you to have time to fall in love with this place for what it is, not because of what you are. To choose Kyle because of him, not because of crowns and bloodlines and duty. She squeezed Lyra's hand. You're not just a princess, child. You're a woman who survived impossible odds, who stayed kind despite cruelty, who chose compassion over bitterness. That's who you are. The crown is just jewelry. That night, Lyra slept in Kael's arms for the first time. They didn't make love that would wait for the mating ceremony, but they held each other close, finding comfort in proximity and warmth and the steady rhythm of shared breathing. I'm afraid, Lyra whispered into the darkness. So am I, Kael admitted. But we're afraid together. That makes it bearable. What if I can't do it? What if I show Darius the paths and he chooses war anyway? Then we fight, Kael said simply, and we win, because I have you beside me, and together we're stronger than anything that could come against us. He kissed the top of her head. Sleep, love. Tomorrow we make peace, or we make war. Either way, we face it together. They arrived at Silver Mist Pack's borders at midday. The territory looked smaller than Lyra remembered. The buildings were shabby compared to Glacier Throne's gleaming ice structures. The pack members, who emerged to stare at them, looked wary and malnourished, like they'd been preparing for war and rationing resources. Alpha Darius met them at the pack house, flanked by 20 warriors who looked ready for violence. He was a large man in his 50s with graying hair and hard eyes that assessed Lyra like she was a problem to be solved. You have nerve coming here, he said without preamble, especially after sending my delegation away with threats. I sent them away with truth, Lyra said calmly, and I've come to offer you the same, a chance to see clearly what your choices will cost. You think you can intimidate me with parlor tricks? Darius scoffed. With light shows and claims of royal blood, I've ruled this pack for 30 years. I don't frighten easily. I'm not here to frighten you, Lyra said. I'm here to show you reality. What happens if you march on Glacier Throne? What happens if you spread lies and propaganda? What happens if you choose peace instead? She stepped forward and Kael's hand tightened on her shoulder. But she shook her head slightly. This she had to do alone. Let me show you, Lyra said, extending her hand toward Darius. Let me share my gift. 3 minutes. That's all I ask. 3 minutes to see truth, and then you can make your choice with full knowledge of the consequences. Darius stared at her extended hand with suspicion. And if I refuse, then we leave, Lyra said simply. And whatever happens next, you'll face it blind, while I see every move you make before you make it. You'll fight a pathfinder who knows every trap you'll set, every strategy you'll employ, every weakness you'll expose, and you'll lose. The certainty in her voice made several of Darius's warriors shift nervously. 3 minutes, Darius said finally. But if this is a trick, it's not, Lyra interrupted. I'm Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon. I don't need tricks. I have truth. She placed her hand in his, and power surged. Darius's eyes went wide as the visions hit him. Lyra was careful, controlled, showing him exactly what she wanted him to see in precise detail. Path 1 War. Darius saw himself marching on Glacier Throne with 300 warriors. Saw the initial victories as they breached the outer defenses. Saw Kael's forces rallying the 12 elite guards, cutting through Silvermist wolves like they were nothing. Saw the battle turning, shifting, becoming a slaughter. He saw himself dying. A blade through his heart. Kael standing over him with ice-blue eyes full of cold fury. His pack scattered his territory, absorbed his name, remembered as a fool who challenged an Alphaking and lost. He saw his mate killed in the fighting, his children orphaned and taken in by other packs, forgetting their father's name within a generation. His legacy erased. Path 2. Propaganda and isolation. Darius saw himself spinning lies about Lyra being held against her will. Saw other packs listening at first, then investigating. Saw Elspeth presenting the Silver Moon pendant at a council of alphas. Saw the moment when everyone realized he'd hidden a princess, had tried to use her for political gain. He saw sanctions, trade embargoes. Silvermist packs slowly starving, isolated, becoming desperate. Saw his people suffering because he'd lied. Saw them turning against him, calling for his removal, demanding new leadership. He saw himself deposed by his own pack, exiled, wandering as a rogue in his old age, being alone and unmourned. Path 3. Alliance. Darius saw himself acknowledging Lyra's royal blood, saw him signing a treaty with Glacier Throne, saw trade routes opening, resources flowing both directions, saw his pack prospering from the alliance, children growing fat and healthy, warriors training in combined exercises that strengthened both territories. He saw himself remembered as a wise leader who'd chosen peace over pride, saw his mate living to old age, surrounded by grandchildren. Saw his name honored for generations as the alpha who'd helped restore House Silvermoon. He saw respect, legacy, peace. The visions ended and Darius staggered backward. His warriors caught him, but he waved them off, breathing hard like he'd run a marathon. That's real, he gasped. That's what you see. What will actually happen? Those are the 3 most likely paths. Lyra said, her voice steady despite her own exhaustion. The power drain was immense. The choices you make now will determine which one becomes reality. But I've shown you truth. Now you have to decide what to do with it. Darius looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Saw not a defective Omega to be used, but a Pathfinder princess who held the future in her hands. Why would you offer me the 3rd path, he asked. After what I did, after I banished you, tried to use you. Because peace is better than war, Lyra said simply. Because I've seen enough suffering. Because alliance makes both our packs stronger. And because I understand what it's like to make choices based on fear instead of wisdom. I'm giving you a chance to choose wisdom now. Silence stretched between them. Darius's warriors watched their alpha, waiting for his decision. Kael's elite guards were tense, ready for violence if needed. The whole clearing felt like a held breath. The 3rd path, Darius said finally. I choose alliance, peace, truth. He dropped to one knee and his warriors followed his lead. I acknowledge Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon. I acknowledge her right to choose her own path, her own mate, her own future. Silvermist Pack releases any and all claims we may have ever had, and we request alliance with Glacier Throne Kingdom, mediated through Princess Lyanna's wisdom. Relief flooded through Lyra so intensely she almost collapsed. Kael was there, immediately supporting her weight, his arms strong and steady around her waist. Granted, Kael said formally. Glacier Throne accepts Silver Mist's request for alliance. We will negotiate terms that benefit both territories, and Torin will be exiled for his role in this conspiracy. Agreed, Darius said. He acted on my orders, but that doesn't absolve him. He'll be gone by sunset tomorrow. They spent the next 3 hours in Darius's pack house negotiating the treaty. Trade routes, shared defense, cultural exchange, resource allocation. Elspeth and Granite handled most of the details while Lyra rested the power expenditure, having left her drained. But she'd done it. She'd prevented a war. She'd forged peace. She'd used her gift for exactly what it was meant for, showing people the truth so they could make better choices. When they finally left Silver Mist Pack that evening, riding out under a white flag and a signed treaty, Lyra felt like a different person than the one who'd arrived that morning. Stronger, surer, finally fully believing in her own power and worth. You were magnificent, Kale said as they rode side by side. Terrifying and magnificent. Remind me never to make you angry. Lyra laughed, the sound bright and free in the cold air. You're safe, she promised. I only use my powers for good. And for keeping your mate in line, Kale teased. You're not my mate yet, Lyra pointed out. We still have to make it official. 3 days, Kale said. We'll be home in 2 days. We'll rest for 1 day. And then I'm marrying you under the full moon whether you're ready or not. I'm ready, Lyra said softly. I'm more than ready. They arrived back at Glacier Throne to find the entire pack waiting for them. Word had spread about the diplomatic mission, and hundreds of wolves lined the streets as they rode through. When they saw the treaty, when they understood that peace had been achieved without a single death, the celebration began. Music, dancing, feasting. The pack poured into the streets in a spontaneous festival of relief and joy. Children ran laughing through the crowds. Omegas embraced warriors. Elders wept with gratitude that their grandchildren wouldn't have to fight. Lyra was swept up in it all, passed from person to person as they thanked her, blessed her, called her their Luna and Savior and Princess. It was overwhelming and wonderful and exactly what she'd never dared to hope for. Late that night, after the initial celebration had died down to a gentle hum of music and laughter in the streets, Kale found her in the ice gardens. She was standing before the sculpture of 2 wolves touching noses, the same spot where he'd first told her he was falling in love. Tomorrow we rest, he said, coming to stand behind her. And the day after we mate. Are you nervous? Terrified, Lyra admitted. What if I'm not good at being Luna? What if I make mistakes? What if— Kale turned her to face him and kissed her gently. You'll be brilliant, he said when they broke apart. You already are. You prevented a war, Lyra. You looked an alpha in the eye and made him choose peace. If you can do that, you can handle anything being Luna throws at you. I won't be alone, Lyra asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Never, Kale promised. I'll be beside you. The guards will support you. Elspeth will guide you. The whole pack will help you. You're not the unwanted orphan anymore. You're surrounded by people who love you. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. You're about to become my Luna, my mate, my partner in all things, my equal. And I will spend every day of our lives together making sure you never doubt your worth again. Lyra kissed him, then deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, she smiled. 2 days, she said, and then I'm yours, forever. You already are, Kale said. The ceremony just makes it official. Swam. The full moon rose over Glacier Throne Kingdom 2 nights later, the sky so clear, the stars looked close enough to touch. The entire pack had gathered in the ceremonial grounds, a natural amphitheater carved into the glacier itself, surrounded by ice sculptures that caught moonlight and threw it in rainbow patterns across the snow. Lyra stood in her Luna chambers being dressed by the Omega Collective. The gown they'd created for her was a masterpiece of white fur and ice blue silk fitted to her body perfectly. Crystals were woven through her platinum hair, catching light with every movement. She looked like winter personified. You're beautiful, Marin said, her eyes bright with tears. Queen Morwen would be so proud. I wish she could be here, Lyra whispered. She is, Elspeth said from the doorway. She carried a circlet of silver and ice, delicate and ancient. This was hers. The Luna crown of House Silvermoon. I saved it when the palace fell, hoping someday there might be an heir to wear it. She placed the crown on Lyra's head with careful reverence. You are Princess Lyanna of House Silvermoon. You are Luna of Glacier Throne. You are everything your mother hoped you'd become. Lyra looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the rejected Omega who'd walked into a blizzard expecting to die. In her place stood a queen, confident, powerful, worthy. "I'm ready," Lyra said. The 12 elite guards met her at the palace entrance, forming an honor guard in their formal white uniforms. They processed through streets lined with pack members holding lanterns. Music played drums and flutes, and voices raised in ancient songs of binding and blessing. When they reached the ceremonial grounds, Lyra's breath caught. Kyle stood at the center, waiting. He wore ceremonial armor of silver and white, with his crown marking him as Alphaking. His ice blue eyes locked on her with such intensity, such love, that Lyra felt tears slip down her cheeks. The guards parted. Lyra walked the path alone, each step her own choice. No one was giving her away. She was claiming her own future. When she reached Kyle, he held out both hands. She placed hers in his, and the connection snapped into perfect alignment. Elspeth stepped forward, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We gather under the moon goddess's light to bind these souls. Alpha King Kale of Glacier Throne and Princess Leanna Luna and Pathfinder daughter of House Silvermoon." She looked at Kale. "Do you claim this woman as your mate, your equal, your partner in all things?" "I do," Kale said. "I claim Leanna not as property, but as partner. I vow to stand beside her, to support her dreams, to honor her wisdom. I promise to love her without reservation, to choose her every day for the rest of my life. She is my mate, my Luna, my heart, and I am hers forever." Elspeth turned to Lyra. "Do you claim this man as your mate, your equal, your partner in all things?" "I do." Lyra's voice rang clear. "I claim Kyle not from duty, but from choice. I vow to stand beside him, to share my gifts, to build a kingdom where all are valued. I promise to love him fiercely, to choose him every day for the rest of my life. He is my mate, my alpha, my home, and I am his forever." Elspeth smiled. "Then by the power of the moon goddess, I declare you mated, bound in soul and spirit, partners in all things." Kale stepped closer, and Lyra tilted her head, exposing her neck in ultimate trust. His canines lengthened, and he bit down gently. The mating mark, the claiming, the bond that would tie them together for life. Lyra gasped as golden light flooded through her, connecting her to Kale in ways she'd never imagined. She could feel his emotions: joy, love, pride, devotion. When he pulled back, she claimed him in return, her canines finding his neck, marking him as hers. The bond flared brighter, stronger, permanent. They turned to face the pack together, and the entire kingdom erupted in howls. The 12 elite guards stepped forward, Blaze, to Luna Liana, who pets her king like a puppy; Cinder, to the healer who saved 12 lives; Granite, to the strategist who chose peace over war; Creek, to the pathfinder who finds the way; Falcon, to the Luna who sees every wolf as worthy; Titan, to the woman who proves strength comes in many forms; Shadow, to the queen who brings light; Raven, to the diplomat who speaks truth; Wraith, to the Luna who acts on wisdom; Blade, to the protector who shields with understanding; Storm, to she who reads the future and guides us through storms; Ash, to the foundation upon which we build our future. Each blessing given with genuine affection. By the time all 12 had spoken, Lyra was crying openly. The celebration lasted until dawn. Finally, as the sun began to paint the sky, Kale pulled her away. They slipped into the ice palace to the Luna chambers and fell into bed, wrapped in each other's arms. "My mate," Kale murmured. "My Luna, mine." "Yours," Lyra agreed, "and you're mine, forever." They made love as the sun rose, gentle and passionate and full of promise. When they finally fell asleep hours later, the mating bond pulsed between them like a second heartbeat. Strong, true, permanent. Lyra stood in the Pathfinder Academy training hall, watching her students practice. 47 young wolves, all showing early signs of Pathfinder abilities, all learning to trust their instincts. She was 28 now, Kale was 33. 5 years of building something beautiful together. The kingdom had prospered. Population had grown. Alliances had strengthened. The academy had become renowned across all territories. Lyra placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the twins move. A boy and a girl, according to Cinder. Due in 2 months. Luna, a 16-year-old Omega, stood in the doorway. Auburn hair, green eyes, defeated posture. Lyra recognized it intimately. "Come in," Lyra said gently. "What's your name?" "Sarah. I was rejected by my pack. They said I was too timid to be useful." Lyra's heart ached with recognition. She crossed to the girl and took her hands. "You're not weak. Come, sit with me. Let me tell you a story." They settled by the window. Lyra took a breath and began. 5 years ago, I was rejected too. My intended mate said I was cursed, unnatural, barely even a wolf. The pack banished me into a blizzard to die. I walked for 6 hours thinking every step would be my last. She told Sarah everything. The cave, the wolves, the test, the journey to Glacier Throne, the threat from Silver Mist, the discovery of royal blood, the diplomatic mission, the mating ceremony. I was nobody, Lyra said softly. A rejected Omega with no pack, no family, no future. But I had something I didn't know about. A gift. A purpose. Worth that didn't depend on others seeing it. She squeezed Sarah's hands. You have that too. The pack that rejected you couldn't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Sometimes rejection isn't about your worth. It's about being redirected to where you actually belong. How do I find where I belong? Sarah asked. You trust yourself. You listen to your instincts. You survive long enough to discover what gifts you have waiting to awaken. She stood and helped Sarah to her feet. Stay here, train with us. And when you're ready, your path will reveal itself. Your pack is waiting. You just have to be brave enough to keep walking until you find them. Sarah left looking taller, stronger, more hopeful. Kale found her minutes later, arms coming around her from behind, hands settling on her pregnant belly. Another successful rescue, he murmured. Another lost wolf, finding her way home, Lyra corrected. They stood together watching sunset over their kingdom. Below, the 12 elite guards ran drills. Some had mates now. Blaze had 3 pups. Cinder had paired with a brilliant young healer, all thriving. Do you ever regret it? Kale asked. The responsibility, the weight of the crown. Never, Lyra said without hesitation. This is exactly where I'm meant to be, with you, with our people, building something that matters. She turned in his arms. I was rejected, banished, sent out to die. And it led me here, to you, to this life, to the ability to help others find their way. How could I regret that? Kale kissed her softly. I love you, more than I thought possible. I love you too. Thank you for waiting for me, for believing in me before I could believe in myself. They stood together as stars appeared, the same stars that had witnessed their mating ceremony. The aurora borealis danced overhead, the moon goddess's blessing still shining. Lyra thought about that girl in the blizzard, the one who'd thought she was dying, who'd believed she was worthless. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting, would she? No, because the journey mattered. The struggle made the victory sweet. The rejection made the acceptance precious. The darkness made the light brilliant. Every step had been necessary. Every tear had watered growth. Every moment of pain had built the strength she needed to become who she was meant to be. Princess, Luna, pathfinder, healer, teacher, mate, soon-to-be mother, but most importantly, Lyra, just Lyra. Finally fully herself, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. If you're listening to this story and feeling unwanted, invisible, wrong, hear this. Your pack is out there. Your purpose is waiting. Your gift will awaken when you need it most. Rejection isn't the end, it's redirection. Being different isn't a curse. It's preparation for the extraordinary. And you are worthy of love, of belonging, of a place where your uniqueness is celebrated instead of condemned. You just have to survive long enough to find it. Trust in your worth, trust in your path. Trust that the moon goddess or fate or the universe or whatever force guides us all has a plan that's bigger than your current pain. Keep walking, keep hoping, keep believing. Your home is waiting. And when you find it, when you finally stand in the place you were always meant to be, surrounded by people who see your value, you'll understand why every rejection was necessary. Because it was leading you here, to belonging, to love, to yourself.